Why did you decide on Burma and why Karen refugees?
Yeah, I had a long-term interest in Burma. The fact that it's been, I suppose, cut off or sheltered for so long, inaccessible, a difficult country to visit, to get information about. I had these romantic ideas about the country and was always curious about what it would be like to visit Burma. And I recently went back to college a few years ago to study and had some Burmese classmates. Learned a little bit more about the country and the ethnic minorities and the repression that has taken place over the last few decades with the ethnic minorities. Got more interested in the situation here and thought I'd like to do something about visiting here, and so I decided to cycle here.
So you raised money for two charities. Could you tell me a bit more about the charities?
Yeah, I thought it important to, I'm very happy about using the opportunity of this cycle to raise awareness and funds for two local charities, one near my hometown, a hospice, and the other for the Karen Refugee Committee, educational part of the Karen Refugee Committee, the KRC. I learned more about the Karen people being driven off their land in the eastern part of Burma and now settled in refugee camps along the Thailand-Myanmar border.
What was their reaction when you said, hey, I'm going to cycle to Burma for you?
Actually, nobody believed me. But after I set off, people began to believe it all right, and I got wonderful support, really wonderful support. And the more I was involved in the trip, the more the issues, I found out more about the issues of the Karen, the KRC, the refugees that are important to them. And I'd like to mention, if it's okay, I'd like to just one or two brief things that came up for me is that there's a real desire, a real wish to be included, to participate in any future negotiations with regard to the educational policy that is happening at the moment in Myanmar. That educational policy isn't formulated without including the ethnic minorities in that. Now, there's obviously all kinds of issues there, what languages education is going to go through and that kind of thing, but that these ethnic minorities participate in making that educational policy in this new, growing, developing and opening up in Myanmar. And the other thing I was learning about the refugees outside Burma, on the border with Thailand, is a strong desire to be included in a future Burma and any peace agreements that they are involved as well, that they aren't just given a solution. Now this is a situation, now you move back and these are your schools and these are your, that they need to actually be involved in the negotiations as well. Yeah.
You said you managed to stick to the route more or less. Could you tell me a bit more about the route? Where did you start? Which countries did you go through?
So the route that I took, basically through Europe, across Europe, through Northern Europe, then through Central Asia, the old Soviet republics, and as far as China. So I got into Western China, and from China then took a right-hand turn over the mountains, the Himalayan mountains, into Pakistan, down through Pakistan, into India, across India in an easterly direction, and to the border with Burma.
Were there any times that you just felt, this is too much, what am I doing?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. There was definitely times. There's definitely times of doubt when I was thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is so far to go, and there were times indeed on my own. There'd be anxieties. In fact, there'd be loneliness as well. And I'd be wondering, what kind of a thing is this that I'm doing at all? And having doubts indeed. But the great thing about cycling is, because it's a physical activity, it helps with actual cycling and moving, it helps to sort of rebalance you again, was my experience anyway. Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about other challenges you faced? You were going through countries that were really, really hot. Tell me about how you prepared and how you coped with the heat while you were cycling.
Well, the first part of the journey basically was through Europe, and that was through the summer I left in the beginning of the summer, the spring in Europe, and I got rain nearly every day all across Europe, and it was so dispiriting. I'd be cycling with my rain gear on every day, the rain pouring down. I had a cap, rain pouring down in front of me. I keep fairly dry because of my rain gear, but it's no fun cycling every day in the rain, and eventually things would get wet. But all the time I had to remember, I will look back with fondness on this rain and cold when I get to the deserts. And indeed, when I got to the deserts, it was a different story. It got to be very hot. Well, the first real heat I encountered was in the country of Azerbaijan. And that doesn't get much rain at all. So that was my real testing, my first test really of the heat. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I realized, okay, Hugh, okay, now it's getting serious. But that was just preparation, because the serious desert came shortly after that. From the coast in Kazakhstan, a city called Aktau, which is an isolated city, not joined by a road to the rest of the country of Kazakhstan. I had to cross the Kazalkum Desert, which took about 7 or 8 days on bicycle through sand. There was tracks there for some of the truck traffic that would have passed, but no habitation. There was no water to support people living there. So that probably was the most physically challenging part of the journey, that 7 or 8 days through the desert.
How did you prepare for that?
Well, the biggest concern, as most people would know, would be water. Water, we can't live very long without water. You can go for days, weeks even, without food, but you can't survive very long without water, and it's very important to plan ahead for that. There were what they call chaihana, which were small little concrete block houses, tea houses, placed every 50 to 70 kilometers along this route through the desert, for the truck drivers that would drive across, and they were a source of shade and rest, and they had some basic food there as well, and most importantly, a source of water. Just on that desert there, that was about 500-600 kilometers through the desert, but there was still another 1,000 kilometers of what they call the steppes, S-T-E-P-P-E, the steppes, just flat land. This is land in Central Asia that is the furthest from the sea anywhere in the world, and it is just, there's very little more than scrub that grows. It doesn't support much life, but it actually was even more difficult to cycle there, because week after week, day after day, week after week, you would have nothing but 365-degree horizons around you.
Wow.
With nothing to stimulate you visually, nothing to keep you like, I'm heading towards that hill. Or every single day it was an endless horizon. Now, it was sometimes magnificently beautiful at night, but day after day and week after week, that became very, very draining.
So, where were you sleeping at night? Were you staying in hotels or camping?
Obviously in the desert I'd be sleeping camping in the desert, and across Uzbekistan, for example, which is huge, big distances. Every night I'd need to decide where I was going to sleep, and occasionally I'd come across an irrigation channel, which was so refreshing to have a wash in an irrigation channel. When you get salt crusted all over you from all the sweating after days of cycling, to come across an irrigation channel and have a wash. And I'll tell you one particular anecdote there. When I came across one irrigation channel, there was a melon farmer there with his melons for sale on the side of the road, and this was magnificent. It was the end of the day. I needed to stop. I had a wash and bought some delicious fresh melons from this man to eat, and he ended up insisting I stay in his property to sleep. Put my tent over this little irrigation channel, a platform which kept me cool during the night, sleeping over the water. He fed me, insisted that I eat with him. Now the thing was, we had no language in common. He was an Uzbek farmer. He had some Russian, I had no Uzbek and I had no Russian. Yet we had a hugely rich and fulfilling and satisfying encounter. I avoided flying all along. I wanted to go overland. I had to take a boat across some stretches of water. Obviously, I live on an island called Ireland, and I had to take a boat across to France, which is mainland Europe. And there was another few boats, two boats I had to take, one across the Black Sea and the other across the Caspian Sea, short stretches. I got a lift on a cargo boat across the sea. And I wanted to stay on the earth, if you like, whether it be on water or land. And so I got as far as Burma. I'd cycled across India and Nepal, came out into northeast India, Nagaland, and into Manipur state in northeast India. And I got to the Tamu More border with Burma, Myanmar, Burma. And I got across the little iron bridge that separates the two countries, and I put my feet on Burmese soil. Walked into the immigration, and I was aware that this border crossing was closed, but had tried to arrange with an agent here and some contacts that I have in Myanmar, Burma, to allow me a special border pass to get through. However, they weren't cooperating. They needed a lot of money, more money than I could afford, to allow me through. And so I had 15 minutes of an interview on Burmese soil before they said, sorry, I had to go back. It was so frustrating to be so close, but yet so far from my destination of Burma. So I was back into India again, went to Calcutta. I was still determined that I wanted to get to Burma, and I wasn't going to let that to prevent me or stop me. So I took a plane. This is the only way I could do it. Took a plane then to Bangkok in Thailand, and cycled then from Thailand into Burma from the Thailand side.
What about some of the happy times? And what was the locals' reaction to you cycling through?
Usually, to tell you the truth, the normal reaction was one of complete bafflement. This middle-aged white man from Europe, Irish guy, on a bicycle with all his equipment and his tent and his cooking gear, cycling in their part of the world. They don't see many tourists, if any, and certainly none on a bicycle. What's this about? It was very difficult for people to sort of understand. But I have to say, without fail, and I really can't think of an exception to this, without fail, I was met with total friendliness and welcome all across my journey, particularly once I got outside of Europe, into Georgia, Azerbaijan, and then into Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the rest of the stands, Tajikistan. It was just welcome, and then of course into Pakistan and India as well. People the general reaction would be smiling and welcoming and asking me questions, even if we didn't share a language. It'd be total curiosity, and it made me feel very good, and I wasn't on my own.
Can you tell me a bit about when you got to Mesa? What was the reaction among the Karen people about your trip?
Well, I was so surprised. I was bowled over, I was knocked over, not literally, metaphorically, with my welcome when I arrived in Mae Sot. Mae Sot is a border town in Thailand, with border with Burma, and there are many, they call it nearly a Burmese town. There are many Karen people in Mae Sot, more than Thai people really. And because of the NGO that I was supporting, I didn't realize this, but a lot of people there were aware of my journey and had been following it on Facebook. And when I arrived, I got this marvelous welcome. It was actually on Christmas Eve that I arrived in Mae Sot, and as you know, in my part of the world, Christmas is our main celebration. And Christmas Eve I arrived, and Christmas Day there was a huge big feast of a dinner prepared by a Karen husband, friend of a friend of mine. Massive spread with lots of people there. And then I visited the camps as well. I visited one camp in particular called Nu Po, and got a lovely welcome there from people. And this is one of the NGOs I'm supporting, is the Karen Refugee Committee, the KRC, the education part, the higher education part of the KRC. And So I'm supporting their schools, and particularly their higher education programs in the camps, and they're now working closely with the Karen Education Committee in the KEC in Karen State, Burma, because obviously the idea is that the Karen refugees will be going back to their homeland, and Karen and the education system obviously has to work in tandem. So it was lovely to get the recognition and the welcome from the lovely people in the camps and in Maysot.
And what is that money going to be used for exactly?
We're going to use that for with the Karen Refugee Committee educational part. That will be used in an ongoing program to train teachers. So that would be post-secondary education, third level education, train teachers. So the idea is that the Karen community would have articulate and educated people who can represent the needs and requirements of their community, whether in negotiations with Yangon or other ethnic. But that's not for me to say. That's obviously it's up to how they do that. But the whole idea is, with education, is that people can compete and negotiate with the broader world outside of their own community.